It's there we go. We're live now on LinkedIn. I'm here with Michael Bettersworth, and I'm really excited. I always feel a little extra personal connection when I have somebody from Austin, having a chance to live there for a few years and in education. So I doubt it's any of my former kindergarten students who are enrolling in your technical college, but I still have this image of kids that I've taught who I know were not the best candidates for college. And the idea that they could go and have a great life and there's other things that they could do is very heartwarming. So I have this really imagining little bodies growing up and attending the technical college and fitting into your program. So a little more of a personal touch to being here. So thank you for being here.
Wouldn't be personal if it wasn't education.
Right. I mean, we all have our experiences with education and our ideas about education, and we'll get to that. The first question I'm going to ask is, what's a difficult conversation that you had to have to get to where you are today?
Oh, that you might have to fire me one day. That was one I had.
Tell me the story with that.
Well, so the story with that, I mean, so out of college, I was working in a place here in Austin called IC Squared Institute, and it was a very storied place that's focus was on basically exporting the American dream to other parts of the country through successful companies, successful entrepreneurships. It was founded by a gentleman named George Kosmetsky, who's worth looking up. And when I left there and came to the college at TSTC, one of the conversations I had with the chancellor at the time is I have a few rules. One, I will never be a yes person. Two, that might mean that you're going to have to fire me one day. Three, I'm probably moving back to Austin in about 3 or 4 years. And that was in an elevator while didn't realize we were having a job interview, but it was you might have to fire me one day because of some of the controversies or topics that we might deal with. So I don't know. That was one of the difficult conversations. I've got 2 young kids, so I'm certain that there's going to be a lot of things that trump that pretty soon. And as I started to go through not anticipating that question, that popped into my mind, but that seems like a pretty easy one.
What made that a difficult conversation? The way you tell the story, I can't hear what made it hard.
Continuity of employment, for one thing. Maybe that was it.
So most people just wouldn't say that. Most people, if they want the job, wouldn't dare say, well, you might have to fire me someday, or we might not always agree. Where did that come from for you?
Well, I mean, it came from a bad leadership experience, frankly, where I worked for a really great leader. And then I had a manager put in between me and that person. And so great plans and great ideas that were afloat all of a sudden and were approved became sidelined. And it was really disheartening to have upper management basically stifle creativity and ideas without a lot of justification. So that happened to me early in my career, where there was a commitment towards vision and ideas, and then they were taken away. And it's something that I've really carried forward in people that have worked for me, that I've worked around, which is our job as leaders is to remove barriers, hire people with skills, talent, vision, passion that aligns with where you're wanting to go, and then get out of their way and resource them.
Wait, say that again and say it just a little bit slower, because it is so key what you just said, and so hard for some people to grasp why that's important.
Your job as the leader, talent, first of all, is hiring great people that have a shared interest in the direction you're wanting to go, the organization, firm, college, et cetera. And then frankly, resourcing them and getting out of their way. The table stakes are good culture, being a pleasant person, great to be around. I mean, competent jerks hit the road, right? We all know that. But then it's really to resource, to take someone's hope and intention and to demotivate somebody that you've invested so much time in hiring, recruiting, training, and positioning, and then to demotivate them is really one of the worst things that you can do as a leader. And it happened to me early on in one of my careers, and I said pretty early on, if that happens to me, you're going to have to fire me. So that's where the source of that conversation was. It's not narcissism. It's not egotism. It's, people as individuals have goals and desires and passions that they're about. And your goal as a leader is to look for how those align and resonate with where you're wanting to go or the organization's wanting to go.
So it sounds like really early on, you had a very strong value in what leadership was supposed to be. And you knew how to stay in your integrity, that as soon as you were unmotivated, you were out of integrity and you weren't going to do a job just to please the other people.
Oh, I have a more difficult conversation then. It gets to that point. Here was a more difficult conversation. there was at that previous place, this new manager put in a regular staff meeting. And the staff meeting was once a week. And all these division heads come in and they basically talk for an hour about how great they are and everything that's going on. And I'm sitting and looking at the watch. And when I realized I was exiting, I said, I'm going to excuse myself from these staff meetings. When there's something that you need me to come here that adds value, I'm happy to do that. But sitting in here and listening to book reports all day is just not a way to live. So that was 23 years ago or so. And I was prepared to be fired. Another difficult conversation one time is when I had a supervisor dress me down in front of my peers for a topic that wasn't. It was a brainstorming kind of session where we were coming up with ideas, and the idea that I put forward was half baked because it was a brainstorming session, and basically my legs got chopped out from underneath me. I was pretty new in the organization at the time, a different one, and pretty young too in the field. So to have a senior leader just eviscerate the concept you threw on the board so publicly and rudely was pretty rough. Now I took it, but I went to that manager the next day prepared to quit, and I said, I'm new to this industry. I need to rely on you for guidance and mentorship given your years of experience. Mm-hmm. But speaking to people in such that way, it's not a way to tear people down. And
wow.
And I'm not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So it was pretty much that manager broke down and apologized and said this was a wow. quality that they had in their leadership style that they've been trying to correct. Other managers, when they heard about the conversation, they said, "How did you have that conversation with that person?"
Right. I'm thinking about all the people on LinkedIn who write about how do you deal with a toxic boss or how to handle and you just had this natural instinct of how to assert yourself, but how to do it in a way that could be heard.
Well, I mean, life's pretty short. So if you're spending time at a place where you're miserable or you have somebody on your team that isn't happy that's there, exit. So I was prepared to be fired and walk out the door. I was kind of already about to head that way, because if that was the culture of the place, there's I have a background in TV production and, movie sets and things, and that you don't have to say thank you or please or be nice. And maybe an expletive or two might fly in the studio because it's live TV, but none of that offends people. It's not about how easily offended you are. If you can't handle that kind of pressure, you shouldn't be in that career. So, but there's a difference when it's because it's mission oriented to get the job done. We have to take the hill and they're coming at us. And so move your right. That's fine. Or heart. So it's not about sensitivity towards how somebody speaks to one another, but the intentionality of it. Right. If it's breaking somebody down that could be contributing to the organization in a meaningful way, well, that's toxic. And that's what happened in that one instance.
Yeah.
It was,
It comes so clearly through, and I'm going to bring this now back to TSTC, but it comes clearly through from you, the integrity, and your communication's like an arrow. It's always going somewhere with a purpose, and it has an impact. And if something is going and taking this arrow on a detour that's unnecessary or something that's not going to help the passion, the purpose, and the mission go forward, then you're like, I don't take BS. You have kind of like a no BS. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm okay. As long as it keeps things moving and going, passion and purpose and integrity sound like they're very key for you.
Sure. I mean, you can take that too far and be on the spectrum where you just don't have any emotionality or care about people and individuals, and that's not very good either. So I think there's a healthy balance between, 4 disciplines of execution, kind of Franklin Covey. This is the reality, which is what you're describing there. What are the KPIs? What are the leading and lagging indicators?
But everything you described all came with empathy.
And then there's the Lencioni kind of stuff, right? Which is the 5 dysfunctions of a team and organizational health and culture and clarity and empathy. And so those are the 2 playbooks that we've utilized over the last 2 decades. And it's that left brain, right brain. It's that fact and accountability and a degree of empathy and organizational health. And those.
Because you mentioned that it's about helping motivate people so that they can move towards those purposes.
Yeah.
But if you're not motivating them, if they're not moving in that direction, so there's a people skill that has to happen alongside it. I love the way you described that.
Well, it's ripping off other people. It's nothing that's novel for me.
Right? No, it's nothing new.
I mean, what makes it really easy is if you're in a career field or a company or an organization with a deeply shared purpose. Go to Mars. Boy, that's a purpose. Help people see again. That's a purpose. Solve traffic, right? I mean, you see the person's company I'm talking about. All of those are so deeply motivated by purpose that your recruitment, your retention, your productivity, your happiness, those are secret sauces.
Yeah.
Technical college, TSTC, come here to get a job. My job is to enroll people to help them realize their version of the American dream. That's a purpose. And it's
Yeah.
having that shared connective thread of a purpose that you're passionate about is critical. Now, the toxic part of that is bureaucracy. The toxic part
Mhm.
of that is where you get people that maybe their pension is in front of their passion. Maybe it used to be their passion was first, but now they're getting close, and the CYA and the bureaucracy and those things, and
Mhm.
people become institutionalized, um,
Mhm.
and and so you got to keep that.
It's a big thing in education, right? It's a big uh
Any company, any
and
large
on yeah.
organization,
Right, right.
yeah.
So yeah, that's where I wanted to go. So you have all this integrity of this purpose driven. You have a no BS kind of attitude. You have a willingness to assert the uncomfortable in the name of purpose and truth and productivity. Like you're not going to
Yeah.
deal with something that's not going anywhere. How does that work? How does that make you the perfect spokesperson for TIA? Uh, I'm
Oh,
stumbling on
TSTC. That's okay.
TSTC. Thank
Texas
you.
Tech.
I was like
Well,
TSTC,
so
Texas, to say the
Texas
full
State
name for the
Texas
Texas
State
State
Technical
Technical
College.
College,
So
right? I'm gonna put it
it's
in
okay.
the
It,
comments.
it
Oh no,
doesn't
I
roll off the tongue. Doesn't roll off the tongue.
Texas
Um,
State, Texas State Technical College. It's kind of like
yeah,
a new tongue twister to try.
it is. We probably
Texas
should come up with a
State
new name for that,
Technical
right?
College.
Yeah. Some people have suggested some
Texas
names of
State.
that that we'd like to change it to. But so well, my own personal experience in education is a traditional higher education kind of aimed at a bachelor's, master's degree. That my family and background kind of gave that advantage of that was an expectation. And I don't know that
Mm.
my parents came to my high school graduation because they're like, yeah, get on with it, you know. So I had the benefit of I
Wow.
had the benefit of that was just a given. There wasn't even really a question. Of
Hmm.
course, that is a rare. I mean, that's not shared broadly. And what I've learned over my 25 years now in higher education is to steal from Matt Crawford is to have a deep appreciation for the diversity of human disposition and
Wait,
people's the
slow that down and
diverse
say that again. To have an
the
appreciation for the diversity of human
human
disposition.
disposition. Yeah. So that
How
book.
does that connect to education?
So that book, Shop Classes Soulcraft, really was a moment in helping me distill some of my own beliefs and incongruencies, these disconnects between
Mhm,
what is the purpose of higher education, what is the purpose of education, and it's not one answer. It's very broad. A law
mhm.
school, a medical school, general education, a liberal arts college, learning to be a welder, a pilot, so much of that, some of it's, I love the commissioner of the Texas Education Agency said last week, unless you're from money, you need a job. Unless you're from money, you're going to need a job.
Mhm.
And that component of the ROI, the need to have an income that can sustain you, your family, your lifestyle, your goals, so you are fully participating in our economy, in our world, in a manner that you don't feel that you're underwater. You don't feel that
Mhm.
you're, which is so hard today with so much exposure about haves and have-nots and the wage disparities that we're realizing. So, I mean, my passion comes from this level of a deep sense of accountability. When we enroll a student, they're putting their time, their money, but most importantly, they're investing their hope that
Oh my gosh.
this is going to have a payoff.
Oh,
And
you just nailed it. I have to say, because I'm married to a professor, so I live alongside higher education,
yeah,
and his campus is filled with a lot of first generation students, and that is what is what college and university represent for them.
yes,
And the bureaucracy of a large University of California campus
yes,
doesn't have that sense of accountability, what you just said.
boy, you
These
want to
kids
walk there.
investing in their hope in us.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, to a
Wow,
degree. I mean,
right?
we believe this so deeply that if you are offering an educational program and the intention of the people enrolled in it is a return on investment, is this goal of employability, and you're offering that knowing that the people in front of you have that as a goal and objective, and your program lacks, lacks in market relevance and doesn't have those outcomes, you're defrauding people. I really believe that you are committing fraud of a high degree,
Mhm.
and probably with a lot of taxpayer money. So we
Well,
can
there are a
go there.
number of different ways that a university could be accountable. Some of it could
Yeah.
be the way a class immediate lines with skill building and has practical,
Well,
but
so
some
let's
of
go
it
there.
could be knowing how to synthesize
Yeah.
the level of critical thinking that you've developed to be able
Yeah.
to
So
pass. There are a number of ways that a university could do that, but most are not doing it at all.
yeah, and this is kind of like a third rail topic. I almost took us down here where I don't want
Well,
to, I
I
don't
like
want to,
to go
I,
conversation, so go there. Go
so,
ahead.
so I think the issue with this, it's about being well-rounded and getting a skill, this
Right?
vocationalization versus this broadening. This is a false dichotomy. It's really yes
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
when we teach somebody attention to detail in a welding lab or flying an airplane, or when we teach
Mhm.
somebody about communication in a surgical lab technician and the communication between the doctor, nurses, etc. Problem solving. All of these things are imbued. They're really critical, and they're taught both in whether that's in an English class or that's a welding lab.
Mhm.
It's not that
Mm.
now where I think we're more accountable towards actually measuring with rubrics and also focusing on which of the soft skills, for lack of a better term, we can talk about that, which of those that are most relevant towards career success, because they vary based on what career you're in. Are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager? Do you need high levels of interpersonal and IQ or emotional intelligence?
Right?
Do you need arithmetic? And so, pardon me. The intentionality around the technical programs that we offer really focuses on which soft skills and what levels of proficiency are most relevant versus they
Mm.
magically fall out of the pages of Beowulf, right? They magically happen. you know you
Right?
read your Chaucer. We just sprinkle that like some magic dust, right? The time of season here.
Full
And
disclosure, I was
critic
an
and
English major.
yeah, and critical thinking evolves, right? You know, versus pounding creativity, pounding conformity out. I remember in one of my freshman English classes
Right.
where I had to write my statement and make 3 supporting facts about it.
Oh my
It
god.
was,
That's like in high school and they do that.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And, I see even in my husband's department, my husband's someone who's trying to teach the kids he teaches students, he teaches graduate students too, how to read the text and ask questions of the text, to
yeah,
always be interrogating the text and
yeah,
always opening what it might offer as new interpretation. But there are people who don't want that. They want to tell you
yeah,
this is what something means, or this is what they've studied about
yeah,
the literature. So even within a discipline, you have some of the same
yes,
argument. But
yeah,
you've come at make an argument entirely for purpose and accountability, and our education system needs to hold itself accountable for its return on investment, and that has to do with what does the graduate get to do in terms of their job. That might not be the only ROI way to measure it.
that's
It's
right.
I think there's possibly we could talk about other ways, but there should be some ROI as opposed to the
Yeah,
business of running a university, which is I'm going to charge kids as much as I can to get them to come to my university,
yeah.
and then they'll learn whatever they learn.
I'm very empathetic to faculty. I mean, a person that is focusing on students and the betterment of that, and I really have a lot of belief that the reason people get into teaching, and whether that's in a humanities field or an engineering field or a
Mhm.
overtly vocational field, the passion to invest your time and energy in the betterment of other people. And similar
Yeah,
to healthcare, people
but
that get
not
into
all.
health.
Let's not assume all faculty and professors are in.
Well, I know that that's right, and similarly with healthcare, but the overwhelming number of people that
Yeah,
pursue working as a nurse, working in these areas
there is
is
a
this.
wanting to better.
Now,
Yeah,
are those that are there for their
better.
own selfish interests, and maybe we're just going to focus on publishing and a bit of narcissism that creeps in, and the student is taught by the TA?
Or the
Sure.
research. Yeah,
Does that maybe happen in maybe in the medical field where somebody's more interested in the right? So that those things, there's certainly edge cases, but as an overall generalization, it's healthcare and education, and the majority of people there, it absolutely care about the people, and it's
right,
why they got in there. I really
right.
am encouraged by that. Now, what breaks that down is the organizational culture and what accounts for success. How are the people working at that higher education institution recognized and rewarded? are they recognized and rewarded for the economic success and career success of their students after they leave, or how many citations they've generated? Are they recognized for the net promoter score of their students and their success afterwards, or how many credits they sold?
Well,
And
for four-year colleges and university, they get recognized by the U.S. News and World Report.
or at some universities,
For
the people
status.
that are focused on the career goals of their students are actually looked down upon within their own institution as being overly vocational and not research oriented enough. So,
A really good point, right?
mhm,
So there's a real tension in education on the needs of the institution to promote its status,
yeah,
or the bureaucracy that evolves,
sure,
and individual participant needs, and this alignment that is such a strong value for you of purpose
sure.
and accountability.
Well, and because I mentioned that diversity of human disposition, well, higher education in particular is also very diverse. It is not monolithic. So when
Mhm.
I talk about accountability, the accountability should really be tied towards the missions and goals of that individual institution. If it's a
Yeah.
law school, it has different goals maybe than, or if it's a liberal arts university, there are different goals and objectives. I think we have to be accountable to the people that are coming there and what their goals and intentions are, and are those aligned? Are the expectations of the student or the taxpayer that's maybe subsidizing some of that? Are we being true and accountable to those individuals and those investments? And if you're endowed privately and you have a largesse that you can offer free consumptive education for somebody that isn't expecting a return on investment,
Mhm.
that's great. But the majority of students, according to the survey of incoming freshmen that's been done for decades, highlights that return on investment and skills to get a job are always in the top three. They
Wow.
alternate between, the other one is, I'm here to study something I'm interested in. And
Mhm.
those are not mutually exclusive either. You can, hopefully you're studying something that you're interested in that aligns with the ability to be economically successful in your career. Combining those two things, your passion and your income, is what we're
Right.
hoping for. So but
Imagine if they
you,
didn't have to be separate. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about my child who's in a small liberal arts college and is
mhm,
studying a lot of things that are in the humanities and social science. But imagine if she could be building a skill just alongside that. It didn't have to be. She could be knowledgeable in those areas,
yeah,
but there could also be a skill, computer
yeah,
something, graphics something, so that if that were built into a school, so that she
yeah,
also could sustain an interest in
yeah,
things that don't
yeah.
necessarily translate.
And it's
I
not
don't
hard
think
to have
about
some level, it's
higher
not hard
education
to
that way.
it's not hard to have some level of intentionality about that. We can take a program and look at the data to see, where are students, graduates, most having the most success. Wow, they tend to be in this particular industry sector. What if we contextualize some of what we're teaching a little bit more to strengthen? What if we
Mm.
added on some badges or micro credentials or some other career exposure opportunities in that vein? We can still keep all of our course outcomes the same in the discipline that we're in, with a little bit of extra intentionality about its relevance afterwards. Just some
Wow.
level of
Wow, yeah.
intentionality doesn't mean that we're going to have to change curriculum, but we can contextualize an example. So, for example, my background's in communications and rhetoric and technology and film and things like that,
Uh-huh,
storytelling. And a lot of people from like Ernst and Young and other consulting firms hired from this Baylor's Communication Studies program. They still do. So that program, while it's focusing on rhetoric and these elements, also is intentional about consulting and where you might be going. So there's intentionality in the field: rhetoric, organizational behavior, leadership,
uh-huh.
and its career relevance. That's great. And programs that do that with some intentionality, you have higher earnings, lower default rates, probably higher alumni donations that come in. So it's, we don't need to be competing.
Intentionality
It's just
really
some
matters.
account of intentionality. And now you can put metrics on it and hold people really accountable. As a technical college, we have to do that. I mean, our
Yeah,
goal is job placement and earnings. So for our institution, it's very clear in the mission. That's not the mission of every institution, though. So I would
right.
not, it would be very um, inappropriate of me to say that everybody should have that metric. However,
Mhm.
some states are adopting earnings outcomes and job placements as part of their state funding models. We did that in Texas for our institution. And the
Yes,
difference between outcomes, not attainment goals, we can talk about that too. Like, outcomes should not be just attaining a degree. That's not an outcome, that's an
Mhm.
activity measure.
Mhm.
Let's go back to the level of education. Your earnings is not, yes, it correlates with the level of education you have, but much more strongly with what field it's in. So
Right.
anyway, there's a
Well,
lot of
all this
ways.
alignment, purpose, and having actual outcomes. It makes sense, and it really does go back to something you said earlier. I remember if it was online or not, but the right and the left, the analytical thinking, but also the very human centric
Mhm.
way of thinking and bringing them together. So I'm curious. So you have young children, and you grew up with this expectation of college. What happens when one of your kids says, "I don't want to go to college, Dad. I want to do this technical college." Anything that would still
Oh
be
gosh. Well, I have two. They're 4 and 2, and they're both so different, and it's fantastic. And I come from a pretty good sized family as well. And I mean, you can already see those differences of human disposition. Boy, are they on
Mhm.
display. I know this is going to be on the internet forever, so I'm not going to characterize either one of you. Um,
Right.
you're all special in your own unique ways. um, yeah, I don't know. Personally, my parents gave very little guidance on these topics, and it was more of a "you're going to figure it out, and we're going to support you as you do." So I
Oh,
wasn't
that's
routed.
nice. That's a great message.
Versus a lot of "you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, don't come home." I mean, I had somebody tell me that they told their kids that yesterday in a job interview. Somebody told me that they just told their two daughters that, and he was kind of joking, but kind of serious too. And oh man, that furthering this kind of "that's the measure of success" is not recognizing that diversity of human disposition, isn't it?
Right,
So I don't
right.
know. It's a
Well,
very
coming from a New
individual.
York Jewish community, I'd say that it would have been a stigma for someone to go to trade school
Yeah.
instead of college. And this
Yeah.
wasn't something anyone I know did, but I definitely can give examples of people. I won't, but I know people who I think would have been benefited from actually having a more specific trade, a more specific skill than having to go through college
Yeah.
because that was what was expected, and that's just what everyone did.
Yeah. I mean, even when you say the word college you have a definition of what that is,
The
and
four-year
everybody.
college was the expectation in my
That's
world,
right.
right?
That's right. So,
Four-year
the
college, and you were probably gonna get a master's too. There was one, family gathering where my grandmother's cousin says, "Well, in our family, we don't just expect you'll go to college, we expect that you'll get a master's."
yeah.
But that's not right for every child, and I've watched
Yeah.
people suffer because their parents are trying to do what they think they can for the kids,
Yeah.
which is to get them to college, but it's not the right thing for the kids.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
do we
it's
deal with
part of.
that stigma? What would you suggest for those conversations?
Well, I mean, there's a continuum here, and I mean, I
Uh-huh.
cannot. It's like me offering parenting advice for somebody. I've got
Um,
to. I would be
I'm thinking about
really.
the person who wants to go, the person who knows that
Yeah.
they probably should go, and they need to now assert themselves the way you did in those
Oh,
earlier conversations that you were talking about. They need to be able to say what's in alignment for them.
yeah. Well, tell mom and
They
dad that you might need to fire. They might need to fire you one day. I guess. I mean, I don't know.
There you
Find your. You're gonna. You're gonna find your purpose, or you can conform. The likelihood of success if you do follow those pathways is statistically pretty sound. So I still think it's good advice. Oh, getting a little feedback there. But if people look at the completion rate in higher education, so many people that were told go do this who fall off the rails, and they leave without a degree, and they leave with debt, and they leave with shattered hope, and they leave with maybe a sense of failure because they've been told and sold a certain pathway. That's cruel. That is really, and we do that in a lot of our education system and a lot of our K through 12. That's why, I mean, when the National Center for Education Statistics publishes a chart that shows earnings by level of education, if you get a bachelor's degree, the median or mean is this, and a master's this, and an associate's and certificate is this. That kind of chart, that kind of data is a dumb fact, and
Mhm.
it creates passionately misinformed policy, passionately misinformed counseling and parenting. And my advice on how you can find economic success through education, because there are associate's degrees that earn more than a lot of bachelor's degrees and certificates and short-term credentials. Um, it's not the level of education that dictates earnings. It's by far its relevance to the market. How valued are those competencies and skills? Go knock out a 12-week boot camp in cybersecurity, right? Or right now, you're probably going to find a pretty high-paying gig. Or UI UX usability is a very big hot topic right now because there's such a
Mhm.
need for that. A line worker, we do a 1-year line worker program, power lines, et cetera. It starts in the 70s pretty consistently. or an instrumentation technician. Like, part of the problem is people don't even know what those jobs are. But
No.
we're seeing six-figure salaries after 3 years in the job market commonly. I mean, that's coming in the averages for instrumentation technique. That degree costs 10 grand. You get it in 2 years, maybe 15 grand of current prices. So this, I did not understand that those career pathways existed through my
Right.
own higher education, liberal arts background. It wasn't until I came to the technical college, met every program chair at 10 locations around the state, that I really had this moment of realizing how ignorant I was about these other options, and then how that had colored my own understanding
Mm-hmm.
and characterization of things. Was I a member of the academic elite? Probably. And then it was now I'm awakened in this appreciation, and I'm going to vehemently
Yeah.
make sure everybody else is as well, is aware of it.
And what you just alluded to really does reverse a certain conversation that happens in this country of people who say, well, they're not educated, or this is the more educated, or who we call the educated. And you just said you became more educated in some ways, or more aware of the value of other kinds of education.
Sure. And the real value of not to live through understanding the world through only the lens of your own experience, which is hard to do, right?
Right.
I mean, this gets to a lot of the problems that we have today, where there's all kinds of issues that come from that ignorance, that drive fear, that drive hatred, bigotry, other kinds of things, because we don't,
Yeah.
you don't put on someone else's skin every day. You have your own, and to realize the passion that somebody gets as a wind turbine technician 300 feet up in the air, which scares the bejesus out of me. But some
Right.
people have a real passion for that particular career field that I might find terrifying or abhorrent or somehow. But to judge it, to judge it from a distance on high, that elitism that does damage. I can think about the TV show Community, that basically makes fun of community colleges. I know there's some positive episodes. I
Haven't
love the
watched it.
show,
Wow. Oh.
but a whole show's premise is based effectively on making fun of two-year college, which is where the majority of people in the country are enrolled in undergraduate programs.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny, but it's also damaging. I think
Mm-hmm.
this lack of appreciation for human diversity and the need for quality educational pathways, whether that's a lawyer or a doctor, a nurse, an educator, a plumber, a wind turbine technician, in any of these roles, they all deserve dignity. They all have, not only do they deserve dignity, they are critical to the grand experiments thriving. They're critical to our economy, our productivity. Our biggest challenge now is that recruiting students into some of these industrial and occupational fields that are high pay, high fulfilling, but they're just not even aware they're an option.
No, and I think there's a real lack right now in some of the trades in particular, right?
Huge.
We
Well,
need
we
those
got
workers, but they're not going there.
yeah. There's three kind of big factors that are really exacerbating this. The lack of awareness that people aren't pursuing some of these fields is a big one, and that's cultural. There are some things like the Make It movement. Roy Spence is leading that to try to educate more people. It's kind of like Milk does. He came up with "Don't Mess with Texas." So Roy
Oh,
Spence and the Make It movement. I'm really hopeful that the Ad Council and others get behind increasing the general awareness on this topic, because
uh-huh.
changing culture is really expensive. Changing our overall zeitgeist, the overall awareness, takes a lot of money. We as a
Yeah.
technical college don't have the money to change culture. Okay.
But you're here having this conversation, and the people who listen for some of it are going to have a new perspective on things, I think.
Probably some pretty heated comments on some of these characterizations of
Well, see,
education as well.
people in
That's fine.
Washington tend to be pretty nice, and not everyone will leave so many comments, but we'll have people definitely taking peeks and a listen.
Yeah.
So to close, if you could wave a magic wand and gift your audience, whether it's your students, at the college, or the people listening here, a communication skill for difficult conversations or for anything, what would that be?
Easy. Assume you don't have all the facts. Right. First, when approaching I had somebody drop a horrible deadline recently, and I just took on a new job, and this was one of their first assignments, and they didn't see it in the group chat, and my first reaction was, "Oh, I'm putting that one on the list of bye-bye," and my first reaction was pretty brisk about it, and then I had to take a step back. that person was having a really bad day. There were some personal things happening in their life, and they missed it. So, empathy is a really, really important thing to bring to the table. We all have some slips and time again. So when something happens that you think is so horrible that person has done, assume you don't have all the facts, seek clarity, start with a question.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I have done the opposite before, where I've come at somebody, we were on a Zoom meeting, and they started taking a phone call in front of a bunch of other people with the video on. Well, the next day I kind of leveled right at them how disrespectful that was, and you need to mute your video. They were dealing with a serious family matter, brought the person to tears. They apologized profusely. I felt horrible. Should have started with the question, hey, that thing happened the other day. What's going on?
Right.
That's
Oh, such powerful advice, right?
yeah.
We're
Assume you
very
don't have all the
quick to
facts.
interpret someone else's behavior and think we know what it meant.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the facts. We don't have the information. There's something we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Any last message words you want the audience to know? Any
Oh, well,
place
I was supposed to talk about SkillsEngine this whole time. So SkillsEngine,
Oh, were you?
go.
Well, you know what? I'll have you back. You can talk about SkillsEngine.
This was great. Thank you so much, Leah. It's a real pleasure. And
Thank you. I appreciate
looking
you
forward
having
to
here. So hang on a second. I'm gonna take us offline. There we go. I think it's taking us